Hello and welcome to another video. So recently I've been working a lot on my website, and I was also studying a lot about how to host websites and web services and stuff like that, and I even spent a lot of time working on a tutorial related to web services on topics that I've just learned. So I spent a lot of time writing down. This is my first written tutorial. You can find it on my website nicemicro.com. But I also created a video that you can, find on these two platforms, on YouTube and Library, if you want to. It would have been a very long process to come up with all these things. I had to kind of combine multiple different tutorials and multiple different websites, the information from multiple different websites to come up with this tutorial. So in today's video, instead, I just wanted to do kind of a monologue. I wanted to just rant about something that does not require either me or the listener to really focus too much, but hopefully I can still, plant some interesting thoughts in the viewers or listeners' head. And this is about a lot of what's going on in this kind of the Linux related YouTube and video and podcast kind of space. I am reluctant to call it a community because I don't know, probably I am not a native English speaker, so like this kind of very loose meaning of community, where any group of people who have like one common somewhat defining characteristic can be called a community. This is a little alien for my thought process, but anyway, so let's just call this kind of Linux adjacent video and podcast creator space, because this has been on my mind recently, because I started watching these Linux related YouTube videos for the information, so to learn about this operating system, first just to learn the capabilities, whether it would be good for me or not. And then when I decided that this is the way I want to go, I want to switch from Windows to Linux, then I had to learn what kind of options are available on Linux. But there are just so many distro reviews and desktop environment and window manager related videos that you can watch, and bash scripting tutorials, of course. So sooner or later I just found myself listening to a lot of this kind of communications or of thought, or how would I say it, like when people just talk about their own opinion based on their experience, or some of them longer, some of them shorter experience with Linux, and how they look at all this ecosystem that's built around Linux, and kind of, let's say, the community built around Linux, the people who use Linux. And so there is this kind of really Linux-focused group, which I would think that one of the biggest example for that is like the Destination Linux network and their programming, which is basically they collected a lot of people who are creating videos and podcasts and writing articles on Linux. And these guys, of course, these are a large shout out because I learned a lot from them, but they probably don't need my shout out. They are very popular anyways. But so they talk a lot about how to bring more people to Linux, and they don't really talk about why to bring more people to Linux. So of course there is this kind of self-centered motivation that if we manage to bring more users to Linux, then it will mean that more developers will consider Linux as a viable platform to develop applications for. And if we have more applications on our platform, that's better for us because we have more choice and we have more things to choose from. And I don't know, that will bring even more people to Linux. And what I wanted to talk about is that there was something came up on YouTube or somewhere a few weeks back, for which I was not inclined to find the source, where someone made a comment that they don't want to bring more people to Linux because if Linux stays at this kind of 2% of desktop share, that's kind of a good spot to be, because it is too low of a market share for hackers to really consider distributing botnets and like other kind of virus stuff on Linux. If we stay just below this threshold, then we will be left alone by the hackers as Linux users. And there was some backlash to that kind of comment in the community, saying that, well, Linux is generally more secure operating system, so hackers will have, or the authors of viruses will have a worse time anyways, and well, a lot of web servers already run Linux, so why don't the hackers try to just attack Linux directly, well, the web servers directly, if they are able to make viruses for Linux. But I don't really know if this opinion has any merit to it. In my specific case, I don't really care about how many people use Linux. If 2% of desktop penetration is quite a lot of people actually, regarding how many people actually have computers. Maybe people won't have computers anymore because everyone just use a tablet, and then this 2% will be a very low number, but on the desktop at least. But maybe then we will have good Linux tablets after that. I don't know. The thing is that we have enough people using Linux that a lot of people actually develop a lot of applications for Linux. And in my point of view, so I'm not really a Linux fan. I am not a fan of this operating system. I don't really care about the operating system itself that much, or the kernel that much, as those guys seem to. So they would even say like, oh, it would be so good if Adobe would port their Creative Suite to Linux, and Microsoft would come up with the Office for Linux, and we could just bring a lot more people into Linux, and in general, like a lot of this kind of proprietary things, or maybe more computer games would be developed with Linux in mind. And I'm like, I don't care, because so this is not why I'm using Linux. I'm not using Linux because there is some kind of like a subconscious attraction in me towards this operating system, or some element of it. I think basically the things that make Linux a great operating system is basically rooted in the kernel, mostly. I'm saying mostly because we know that it's not 100%, but mostly built under a GPL license, a copyleft license, a free software license. So this is a free software operating system which promotes the use of free software programs on it. So I have to say that even before I switched to Linux, I used mostly free software on my computer under Windows, because I just knew that I don't really want to pay all those proprietary companies to make software that I actually don't care about, and they just make the software, they're optimizing their software to make them more money, and they are not optimizing the software to make it better for the user. While in the free software case, because usually the people who develop these programs, they started to develop them for themselves, so they have like a different kind of incentive. They want to make that program as good as possible, and their way of monetizing it is mostly from donations, and people will donate to them if the program actually does what it what they say it will do, and if it does it well or not. And so for me, even before switching to Linux, using more and more of these open source and free software alternatives was the main drive, which eventually led me to ditch the proprietary operating system because I stopped playing StarCraft. I guess that was the only proprietary program that I really used back then, but I totally got convinced that free software is the way that I should run, at least or specifically my home computer that should run on free software, and Linux is the free software operating system that is good, and it is secure, and it is respecting your privacy for the reason that it is open source, and for the reason that it's free software, and basically people who are creating this operating system, they are creating it for themselves to use it, so they make it as safe as possible. They let everyone to look at the source code, so all these good guys, the white hat hackers, can find all the problems with it, and it can be patched. And so in my mind, if we just start thinking about spreading Linux to more and more people without the reason why we are using it, or like just considering the use Linux as kind of like an abstract commandment that we got from somewhere, that we have to use Linux and we have to bring more people to Linux, without considering that the reason why Linux is good is the freedom and the privacy and the security which derives from that freedom, then I think we are really off the target. So if we would convince all the big companies to bring their huge proprietary programs to Linux, what would the advantage to be for those people who actually use Linux for the proper reason, the reason because they respect their own privacy, and they want an operating system that works for them, and they don't want to be like the data source for an operating system or something like that. And that's why when people get excited about all the technologies that make it very easy to bring proprietary code to Linux, like snap packages, because you just compile the binaries and compile in or put all the dependencies into the binary, and just you can deploy that binary whenever, wherever, whatever the case will be. I don't like that. I prefer the free software that you can compile on your own computer if there is no binary that would be compatible to your operating system. I would prefer if that would be the norm, instead of trying to bring formats that make it easy to bring software to our platform that don't respect us. And the same with computer games. I might have noticed that I am very much against all the big AAA game producing studios, because they don't treat their employees well, and they don't treat their customers well either. So why should I care about what they produce? I don't. And so for that reason, that the gaming stuff for Linux, I prefer the games that are free and open source, and I can compile them. If there is no binary compatible with my setup, I can just compile them from source. And I guess that's my take on Linux. If I would like to spread Linux, I wouldn't want to try to spread Linux. I actually would want to spread consciousness about computing freedom. So I think just spreading Linux to people who don't care about their computing freedom is a meaningless thing, because what does anyone gain from just using a different operating system if they just use it because someone told them that Linux is better than Windows, and you can just use GIMP instead of Adobe Photoshop, and Steam with Proton will make it possible for you to play like 90% of the games that you played anyways. So why would you convince them for that? I think if we want to convince people of something, then we should convince them why free software is important, why it is practical to use free software, why free software is like a better ideology, which is more focused on the user, instead of just use those proprietary licensed stuff that will give you like a 25-page end user license agreement that no one reads, and they can do whatever basically on your computer that they want. I think it is a better idea to start with the mindset, and once the people have the mindset, they will choose the operating system that aligns with the mindset, and then they will come to Linux. So this is my hot take, I guess, on spreading Linux to the masses, so to speak. And I hope I could, plant some good ideas in your mind, or at least make you think about this in a new way or something. And so if you find my rant annoying and you find some inconsistencies in that, then you can just, go down the comment section and tell me what you think. And well, you can give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and subscribe to this channel if you are interested in this kind of open source and free software and Linux related rants. And also tutorials will be coming. I will be doing some more Arch Linux installation tutorials. We are finally getting to install a graphical user interface on our Arch Linux install as soon as I get my stuff together. I am also preparing a video where I will talk about my 1-year experience on Arch Linux on my desktop computer. And well, I guess I will see you then. Bye bye.